Hello, and welcome to A Postdoc's Journal, the show that takes you through my journey into and eventually out of academia as a postdoctoral research scientist. My name is Simit Patel. Hello, thank you very much for joining me. Welcome back to those of you who may have listened to the show before, and a very warm welcome to those of you who may be listening for the very first time. If you don't already know, this podcast is based on my own personal journal. In each episode, I read out a journal entry from 11 or 12 years ago, back when I was working in academia as a postdoc, as a research scientist. Then I reflect on it, I analyze it, I try to make sense of it, and share my thoughts with you today with the benefit of over a decade of hindsight. If you are someone who can relate to things like impostor syndrome, loneliness, and mental health issues in the workplace, whether you're in academia or not, I hope that by sharing my own personal experience with you, that helps you to feel a little bit less alone. In today's episode, we jump to January 2014. This is the first journal entry of 2014, and at this point I'm coming up to the end of the initial 2-year contract that I was on as a postdoc. But if you recall, I was lucky enough to be granted a 5-month extension on my contract. I had had a good break in the UK over Christmas in 2013, where I was able to gain a bit of perspective, and I was very hopeful that I could take that positive energy back into the new year. Sadly, it took just one email from my research institute to bring back all the problems that I was having before. Before I read out the journal entry, if you've listened to the show before and you've liked it and you found it interesting, I would really appreciate it if you could take just 1 minute of your time to leave a review or some stars or hearts or thumbs or whatever you use to show your appreciation wherever you are listening to this. If you normally subscribe and follow things, please subscribe and follow this podcast too. I've also started a Reddit channel where you can join the conversation. Links to everything are in the show notes. So have a listen to the reading now, and I'll be back at the end to share some thoughts with you after 11 years of hindsight. Enjoy. January 10th, 2014. I had a little reminder today about how I'm failing again. I got an email from the secretary asking for a list of general achievements for 2013, like awards, giving expert advice, committee appointments, publications, and third-party funding. I haven't achieved anything. I had nothing to add to the list. I'm not adding any value to my research institute. I'm only taking, not giving. The borrowed time I bought myself by making all these promises about how much I can achieve has run out. I'm a fraud. And my boss has already figured that out. An old friend gave me some good advice recently, although at the time I didn't really listen. He said I should find collaborators who can do the bits that I can't do. So if I'm good at gathering data, but not writing papers, I should find someone who's really, really good at writing papers. Allying myself with the right people might be the key. That would allow me to focus on the bits I'm actually good at. I immediately dismissed his advice, saying that I want to be the one who does everything. I am actually good at all of those things individually. I can do it all. And I like the fact that I can do it all. At least, I think I can do it all. Obviously, I can't, and that's my problem. That drive I had to explore alternative career options over Christmas has gone. As soon as I started work this week, I snapped right back into feeling stuck in academia. It was like nothing had changed. The change in mindset I had over Christmas was for nothing. The drive I had to explore my options and sort out my life has been replaced with depression because of my work. I'm still a fuck up. I'm not being efficient enough, focusing too much on small details that don't matter. My brain can't work any other way. I need some real reprogramming. How do I change who I am? Okay, thank you very much for listening to that. As usual, I've written down some thoughts after reading that back and hearing that back. In the last episode, at the end of season 1, I talked about how changing your environment can sometimes help you to think a bit differently. But I also talked about how going back into a toxic, unhappy environment can immediately make you feel shitty again. Sometimes a holiday isn't actually what you need, it's just a short-term fix. And it's worthless if you go straight back into a toxic, unhappy environment. I think the last episode demonstrates the first part of that quite well. When I went home over Christmas back in the UK, I was able to gain a bit of perspective and actually be a little bit kinder to myself about my performance that year. But here I am back to work in January, back to working in an environment that was making me feel as bad as I was feeling before I left. So I was back at square one. When I was writing this reflection of this journal entry, I was quite surprised at how many topics I got out of this. I want to revisit a few topics that we've actually talked about before, such as the academic value system, imposter syndrome, and believing that I was the problem. But I also want to talk about feeling that pressure to be good at everything, which I think is quite unique to academia compared to the jobs I've had in the real world. And I want to talk a little bit about the difficulties that I have around taking advice from people. Before we get into the reflection, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you ever worry about your paper being rejected because the English isn't good enough? One thing I've always been good at is writing, but I know not everyone finds that easy. Perhaps English isn't your first language, or for some reason, the words you write just don't quite capture what you want to say. Good English can enhance your scientific credibility, increase the chance of your article being accepted, and speed up the peer review process. Whether you're a research scientist, a scientific writer, or part of a dynamic biotech company, I want to help you with my professional copy editing and proofreading services for scientific English. Enhancing the clarity and precision of writing has been an integral part of my professional life in academia and in the biotech industry for over a decade. If you need a native English speaker with a solid scientific background and a professional certification in proofreading to refine and polish your writing, I would love to help you. Please visit simitpatel.com, that's simitpatel.com for more information. Thank you, and now back to the show. So this entry is a nice reminder of the academic value system and how it can really mess with your head. I even listed them off in the journal entry, publications, grants, etc. That's what value is measured by. And it's not just in my head. Here I have an email from the Research Institute asking me to list those achievements. And they give me a specific list of what they consider to be achievements. I wrote that I felt like I hadn't achieved anything. At this point, I had fully adopted academia's value system. I was brainwashed into it. That kind of thing is difficult to see at the time. It's only now that I'm kind of free of that brainwashing and I've had some distance from it, I can recognize that I was brainwashed. I was measuring my own value, and I'm sorry to say, the value of other people as well, based on these bullshit metrics of success. So it was true at the time. I genuinely believed that I hadn't achieved anything. I did a lot of stuff and I was very busy. I probably ticked thousands of items off all my to-do lists that previous year. I must have read, over 100 papers. I was running a weekly journal club. I did several thousand PCR reactions in the lab. I had helped other people with various things in the lab. I was learning new skills all the time. I was becoming a better scientist. I was developing. And I was doing all of that with the challenges of living in a foreign country. I had learnt basic German. I had found a great apartment. I had earned enough money to start paying off some of my debts. I was doing music, I was doing improv comedy, I was building a very full life. But none of those things could actually be measured by academia's very narrow metrics of success. I could have read 1,000 papers, but it wouldn't have counted for anything because academia doesn't measure success by the number of papers you've read. Today, it makes me feel a bit sad that I actually achieved so much, yet I didn't feel any of that success at the time. I actually feel a sense of loss. It's almost like I'm grieving that sense of achievement that I probably should have been feeling at the time back then, but I didn't. More generally, I think so much of how we judge ourselves is actually how others judge us. We adopt their judgments of us and mistake those for our own judgments of ourselves. What we think of as our own beliefs about ourselves are actually not ours at all. They're just absorbed from the environment around us. In this case, because I felt that academia and my research institute didn't deem me successful and valuable, I didn't deem myself as successful and valuable. I sometimes wish that I had been taught from an early age to develop my own judgments about myself. Instead, I feel I was taught to outsource my opinion of myself to other people. I was taught to leave it up to family and teachers and the school to tell me how good I am, which is still important and it's valuable for functioning in this world that we live in. But I think it needs to be balanced a bit with a healthy self-image too. I see a lot of bullshit these days on my social media about how you should be making your own definition of success. But when I think back to my time in academia, I question how valuable that kind of thinking actually is. It's a lovely idea to define your own success, and that might make you momentarily feel warm and positive about yourself. But until academia changes its value system, defining your own success won't actually get you ahead in academia. Those are just the rules of the game. Perhaps if I had defined my own success back then, it would have helped me save my mental health a little bit, but it wouldn't have saved my academic career. I said something about feeling like I'm adding no value to my research institute. I felt like I was taking more than I was giving, kind of like a parasite. And this was leading to a sense of worthlessness in me. I've recently heard some people talk about this in the context of masculinity, and I'd be interested to hear what my female listeners think about this too. One of the fundamental needs that men, generally speaking, have is a need to be of value to the community, being a net giver and being of use. At work, I've always pushed myself to work pretty hard to contribute to the company and for the benefit of my colleagues and the customers. In other aspects of my life and in this journal entry, when that need to be of value is not being met, that triggers this sense of worthlessness in me, which puts me on the path to depression. But would be interested to hear what my female listeners think. Reach out to me and let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I wrote a little bit about feeling like a fraud and feeling like I didn't deserve to be there. I won't spend too much time on this because I think we've covered imposter syndrome a lot in previous episodes, but I just want to highlight that the imposter syndrome that I wrote about in episode 1 of season 1 is still there. It hasn't dissipated at all. The imposter syndrome was there in 2011 before I even started my postdoc, and it's still there with the same intensity in 2014. That's a really long time to experience something. If imposter syndrome were a disease, it would be classified as a chronic disease in my case. I actually don't blame academia for making me experience imposter syndrome. It's not about academia at all. I've experienced imposter syndrome since leaving academia, so academia was never really the problem. It's a much deeper problem within me. I want to talk a little bit about feeling the pressure to be good at everything. Even now, when I look back on my time in academia, I can still feel that pressure to be good in the lab, good at data analysis, good at statistics, good at writing, project management, presentations, vector graphic software, absolutely everything. Being able to do everything to an extremely high standard was the only path that I could see to being successful. And I knew I was capable of doing all of those things. I am skilled in the lab, I am a good writer, and so on. And that's one reason that I found it so difficult to take my friends' advice about finding collaborators to help me. To me, it made no sense to outsource the things that I'm actually good at. Part of this might be down to ego and partly down to me being an introvert too. I very much want my achievements to be my achievements, to be my own. And in my mind, if I accept help from others, that's like admitting that I'm not good at something. And that doesn't make sense to me because I know that I am actually good at those things. But I think at the time, during my postdoc, I was very much socialized into believing that I needed to be good at everything because during my PhD, I was taught that research is an independent endeavor. If someone does part of your research for you, that's generally not okay. I think I never really had too many positive experiences with collaboration at that point in my life. I think I never really had good collaboration modeled to me. I didn't see it in others. That is part of myself I think I'm still working on. I'm a lot better at recognizing the things that I'm not good at and understanding where I need help. But I do still have this pattern of behavior where I put myself in situations where I need to be good at everything. So that pressure to be good at everything is still there for me. So maybe academia was never the problem in that respect. It's, again, just something inside me. I think my friend's advice was actually quite good, that I need to partner with people to divide the work as a shortcut to academic success. Taking advice feels like a skill that I never really learned, certainly not at that point in my life. Back then, I would see someone giving me advice as criticism of me. I would think that this person is judging me or attacking me for being a failure and being inadequate in some way. I would get defensive and sometimes quite angry because I felt the need to defend myself against that attack. Today, I think I'm much better at taking advice from people, or at least I've learned how to be more thoughtful about assessing whether advice is good or not. Rather than seeing any advice as just a blanket criticism of me, I've learned to think about who that advice comes from and assess whether they know what they're talking about. I have to say that I got much better at taking advice since I left academia and I was working in different environments. I feel like that skill was learned as I matured in a professional working environment in a company. And I think internally I had to learn how to build my own self-esteem and my own confidence, self-confidence first. And then I was more receptive to being able to take good advice and to assess it and not seeing it as a criticism of me. The final point I want to talk about is about this belief I had that there was something inherently wrong with me. I wrote about how I thought the problem was with how my brain worked and how I was approaching the work. Reading that back, it's like watching myself go down the wrong path and just seeing myself make a mistake. I can say that with hindsight, that 90% of the time, what we think of as our weaknesses in one context is actually a superpower in another context. In that journal entry, for example, I wrote about how I focused too much on small details, and that was making me inefficient and unable to get publications in a tight time frame. Now, caring about the small details and being really careful with the science and not wanting to make a single mistake were not so helpful traits in the context of working as a postdoc, where I needed to get work done quickly against the time pressure of a tight fixed-term contract. But I can confirm that these exact traits have been extremely useful for me in my career and in my life since leaving academia. In fact, those exact traits that were not benefiting me in academia are exactly what put me in a much better place in my career and life later on. So for any of you that are listening that might think that you are doing something wrong and that's why you're having a shitty time, the message is you're actually fine the way you are. You don't need to fundamentally change yourself to suit the job. You might just need to change the job to suit yourself. So there you have it. Like I said, I was very surprised at how much material I was able to get out of this one journal entry. It's always very satisfying for me to connect the dots between my thinking back then and my thinking today. This journal entry reminded me that I am still a work in progress, and the message is that that's okay. In the next episode, we jump ahead to March 2014, so a couple of months after this journal entry. I expand a little more on my experience of collaboration in academia. The problems I was having at work were also bleeding out into my life outside of work. And this is also when I started to show the first signs of depression. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that was valuable for you in some way. Until next time, please be kind to yourself.
Brood about it, brood until the day, one day I will find the words to say.
Thanks again for listening to A Postdoc's Journal. I've been your host, Simit Patel. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others who you think might find it helpful and interesting. You could also leave a review over at Podchaser or on Apple Podcasts. If you can relate to anything in this episode, or if you have your own take on that journal entry, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Reddit. Links to all my social media are in the show notes. Thanks again.